Hello and welcome. This is Peter Akbar once again with you with a new episode. In this episode, we are going to respond to Esther Kamakshi Dhanraj, her accusations against a 4th century theologian and a scholar of Hebrew, Greek and Latin. His name is Jerome. So we are going to look at the accusations that Esther Dhanraj brings against him, and we are going to respond to them. But before that, I have a request to make, and that request is, if you like my videos, do share with your friends and colleagues so that they will be informed of the truth. Not only that, do subscribe to my channel, and also, yes, press the like button. Okay, let's go ahead and see what are her accusations and what is the truth. So, in the first off, here it is what she says.
In the preface of the 4 Gospels of his Vulgate version addressed to Pope Damasus, Jerome admitted, "We must confess that as we have it in our language, it is marked by discrepancies." Jerome also lamented it was useless to correct the new for versions of scripture which already exist in the languages of many nations show that their additions are false. What this means is that the Bible had already gone out into the world with false additions and discrepancies, and it would be useless for Jerome to correct them in the version that he was producing.
Here is the preface of the open letter that Jerome wrote to Pope Damasus, and in that open letter you will see these 2 quotes being quoted by Esther Dhanraj. Number 1, we must confess that as we have it in our language, it is marked by discrepancies. The second quote that appears is that, and it was useless to correct the new for versions of scripture which already exist in the languages of many nations show that their additions are false. So she basing on these 2, she says that Jerome admitted to the fact that the Septuagint version consists of many discrepancies and these cannot be corrected, and he confessed it. But is it so? Is that what Jerome is saying? So you can go back in the video and check the whole letter, read it carefully. If needed, read it twice or thrice to see what I have marked, whether the way Esther conveyed, is it really so? Is that what Jerome is saying? Let's see. So let's look at the first quote. The first quote is, "We must confess that as we have it in our language, it is marked by discrepancies." But if we carefully look at it, the statement doesn't stop over there. It's only half of the statement that she quoted or underlined. Now, in a flowing video, as the quotations come in and they are being underlined, people tend to read only the marked sentence but not prior to it and later the following sentence. So what I'm going to do is that I will let you read the remaining statement or the complete statement. This is what the further statement says. Let me read the whole sentence. "We must confess that as we have it in our language, it is marked by discrepancies, and now that the stream is distributed into different channels, we must go back to the fountainhead." What is he saying? Since there are discrepancies in the Latin Vulgate, he is talking about Latin Vulgate. Since we have, we must confess that we have it in our language, that is Latin language, it is marked by discrepancies. And now that the stream is distributed into different channels, we must go back to the fountainhead. What is this fountainhead? What is he talking about? Now, fountainhead in order to correct the Latin Vulgate discrepancies. These Latin Bibles, which were Latin versions, which were translated by other people at the time of Jerome, since they contained discrepancies, Pope Damasus requested Jerome to revise it, because even he knows that there are discrepancies. Now Jerome says that since we have these discrepancies in Latin Vulgate, in order to correct them, we have to go back to the fountainhead. What is this fountainhead? If you read couple of verses prior to this statement, he says, if on the other hand we are to glean the truth from a comparison of many, why not go back to the original Greek and correct the mistakes introduced by inaccurate translators and the blundering alterations of confident but ignorant critics, and further all that has been inserted or changed by copyists more asleep than awake. Now what Jerome is saying is that since Latin Vulgate has many discrepancies, if we want to correct it, revise it, remove these discrepancies, we need to go to the fountainhead, that is the Greek original Septuagint. Why do we call it Septuagint in the first place? Is because this Septuagint, septa means 70. There were 70 scholars, or in some cases some theologians suggest that 72. These 70 or 72 scholars of Hebrew and Greek for the first time translated the Hebrew Bible into Greek language. Because it was translated by 70 people, it is called as Septuagint. Now, just like Jerome has undertaken the responsibility of revising the Latin version, there were other people by the name, there are two names that in the preface we will see their names, Lucian and Hesychus. Lucian and Hesychus. I'll come to that part a little later. These people revised the Septuagint. So just like there are versions, many copies of the Latin Vulgate, there was not one Septuagint, there were multiple Septuagints at the time of Jerome. So when he said, Jerome said, let's go back to original Greek and rectify these discrepancies, he was talking about that Septuagint which was originally translated by the 70 elders. So when Esther Dhanraj says we must confess that as we have it in our language, it is marked by discrepancies, the statement doesn't end over there. It continues. And the continuation is that he is providing a solution how to rectify these mistakes by going back to the fountainhead, by going back to the original Greek, which was originally translated by the 70 people. That's the reason we call it Septuagint. Now let's look at the second quote. The second quote, and it was useless to correct the new, for versions of scripture which already exist in the languages of many nations show that their additions are false. Now I want you to carefully observe two letters or two words, two words. One is new and another one is there. One is new. If you look at in the statement, N is in capital letter, and if you read further, their additions. Now their additions, whose additions? Because Esther Kamakshi Dhanraj, after quoting the second verse, she says what this means is that the Bible had already gone out into the world with false additions and discrepancies, and it would be useless for Jerome to correct them in the version that he was producing in the case of the Vulgate of the Old Testament. That's nonsense. That's not what the statement is saying. And I am amazed. I don't know whether to laugh or pity on her reading and comprehension skills. Why? Because the whole letter is right in front of you. You can pause and read the whole letter and see whether this is what Jerome is saying. Let me give you clarification. Like I said, she cunningly quotes only half of the statement. Whichever portion is convenient to her, she quotes that. Either she blurs the remaining part of it or underlines only those things which she wants to lay emphasis on, and she leaves all other parts of it. Now that's not an honest way of doing or presenting things. Now let me read the complete statement for you with regards to the second quote. That is, Jerome says, it is obvious that these writers could not amend anything in the Old Testament after the labors of the 70, and it was useless to correct the new. It was useless to correct the new. Now, what Jerome is saying is that there are certain writers who were revising the Greek Septuagint. So Jerome didn't like it. Jerome was not favorable of their revision. So he, speaking about those writers, he said it is obvious that these writers could not amend anything in the Old Testament after the labors of the 70. What does it mean? What Jerome is saying is that the Hebrew Bible is already translated by 70 elders. 70, these scholars and theologians, they were usually called as 70 elders. So what these Lucian and Hesychius are going to amend, forget about the Old Testament. He says it was useless to correct even the new, because the New Testament is already written in the Greek. What are they going to amend the New Testament? And then he further says, even if they amend, even if they try to incorporate something of their own or try to correct, Jerome says, for the versions of the scripture which already exist in the languages of many nations. What Jerome is saying is that there are Bibles in different languages exist in the world. When you compare these Bibles which already exist in different languages and compare these Lucian and Hesychius edition or the revision of it, these languages, the Bibles that are there, they will prove it that these people's additions are false. Now, having this, let us read the whole statement now. I pass over those manuscripts which are associated with the names of Lucian and Hesychius, and the authority of which is perversely maintained by a handful of disputatious persons. It is obvious that these writers could not amend anything in the Old Testament after the labors of the 70, and it was useless to correct the New Testament, because versions of the scripture which already exist in the languages of many nations show that their additions, whose additions? Lucian's and Hesychius' additions are false. This is the point Jerome was trying to convey. Okay, so here you can see the two names, Lucian and Hesychius.